Namaste. This is episode 50 of Jack Colley's Black Book, and we're continuing to talk about my Christmas album, Jeanette Isabella, A Christmas Love Story, and it's based on the Christmas carol Bring a Torch, Jeanette Isabella. So this is where it kind of stemmed, that and a little tiny clip of Jingle Bells that I wrote a couple years ago, just kind of noodling on the keyboard, turned into this Christmas album that that I really like. I hope people give it a listen. Today we're talking about this scene of Christmas that in my mind is, it's almost like it's the most intense moment, I think, of the Christmas story. And it is when the birth of Jesus took place. And I found myself reflecting on the anesthetized version of the manger scenes that I have upstairs in my home. And I found myself thinking about when my two children were born and I was in the birthing room with their mother, and particularly with my son. It was one of the most intense experiences I ever had. I felt bad for my son's mom because there was even a point where I got so overwhelmed that I got lightheaded and some of the nurses had to attend to me. And there were some medical things going on with my son that were very unsettling and very concerning to his mom and me. But I was the one that, I've always been one to get lightheaded at the sight of blood, and that's just kind of who I am. But anyway, it's incredibly intense. And when we have this story of the birth of Jesus, not only do we have Mary giving birth to Jesus, which is a messy, messy process, but we also have all of these angels showing up, and I think they're showing up almost in the role of protecting the baby Jesus, the avatar of God that has shown up. And that's kind of where I want to hang out and talk today about verse 3 and verse 4 of the opening song of the album, which is in the bleak midwinter. And so verse 3, it goes like this. It is him who cherubim worship night and day, breasts of milk and honey, a manger full of hay. The babe awakes, the angels bow, the ox and ass adore. All of earth falls prostrate, and life begins once more. So that's verse 3. And again, I took some liberties with the lyrics to better fit the narrative and connect all the songs together. But I want to talk about some of the visuals that I have, some of the things running around in my imagination as I wrote this and I started kind of putting it together. So it is him, it's Jesus in this manger. And remember that, I don't look at necessarily one being as being God incarnate. To me, God incarnates all sorts of different beings. And in different religious traditions, those are called avatars. It's when God shows up on the planet. Now, I will say that I don't know of another example, another avatar, or another incarnation of God that I could look at and say, that's close, that's something. I mean, to me, and it's probably where I was born, it's probably how I was raised, it's probably me being surrounded by more of the Christian tradition, I find myself saying, God shows up to earth and God would look like Jesus. If God would incarnate something, it would look like Jesus. What's fascinating, though, to me is that this incarnation, this avatar shows up, and it's an infant. It comes out of a human mother in a very messy process of birth, a very intense process of birth. It's this child is born into the world, and what's interesting is we have these characters show up. we have these guardians show up. And if you think about it, that might not be a bad idea for a storyline. I mean, if you have God incarnating an infant, then that infant is probably going to need protection. And here's one of these things I like people to think about, because whether or not you believe this happened literally or not, there is something pretty awesome about how this storyline unfolds, that this infant comes into the world and is in the middle of the manger scene. And when I found myself thinking and reflecting on this particular song and adjusting it as needed, I found myself really fascinated with how limiting the manger scenes are that I have set up upstairs. I've got a couple manger scenes set up upstairs for the Christmas holidays, because one of the manger scenes only has one angel. And so I want to paint a picture of what this Christmas carol is painting. So it is him whom cherubim worship night and day. So cherubim, I did a little bit of cursory research because I like to kind of dig a little bit deeper with some of these things. And cherubim, what I found was, well, first of all, let me tell you what cherubim is not, the way it shouldn't be visualized, because I think a cherub is what's the fat little angel that shoots the arrows? Cupid. So you got Cupid for Valentine's Day, who is a cherub. I don't know how that's related to cherubim, but cherubim have two sets of wings. And so I have a picture here, and there's the cover of the Christmas album that I was supposed to advance a couple minutes ago. But here's an AI picture of angels, of cherubim. So cherubim have two pair of wings. So one of the pair of wings is for flying, and this was interesting to me. The other pair of wings is for covering or protection. So part of me is picturing like a vampire, protecting, but covering, but also protection. And so we have this manger scene where we have this infant in the manger, and we have these cherubim. And the cherubim were also, they also had the flaming swords outside the Garden of Eden. So cherubim are very powerful angels. They're guardians. And if you think about it, you have this avatar of God, this incarnation of God show up. And in the story, you have these cherubim that are protecting this child, this baby. Unlike any other religion, all of the other religions have certain avatars that show up, certain incarnations of God. They all kind of have the same thing. But to my knowledge, Christianity is the only one that has this avatar, this incarnation in an infant, which I think it just makes for a really good story. But anyway, so two pair of wings, and they worship night and day. Then the next line has this, because I really liked this image, and I changed the words a little bit. So it is him who cherubim worship night and day, breasts of milk and honey, a manger full of hay. Now, the reason I had breasts of milk and honey is because breasts, of course, is sustenance for a baby. That's the Mother Earth. That's the part of the sustenance that an infant would need, is the milk from its mother's breasts. There's also this element of honey, which gives it somewhat of a sexual overtone. And, some people will be like, oh, you're reading into that or whatever. But, let's be realistic. Breasts, in culture, have multiple meanings. And one of them is sustenance. And one of them is there is an element of sexuality and intimacy to them. And so we have breasts of milk and honey. And gosh, I find myself thinking, maybe I'm just a child of the 80s. The rock music in the 80s was very sexualized. I mean, I'm thinking of Duran Duran. I'm thinking of Freud now. So the psychology professor is like kicking in, and I'm thinking, okay, you just took something and you made it like it wouldn't be a phallic symbol because that's male. It would be like a clitoral symbol. I think that's the word that they use for the female symbol, like the flowers in Georgia O'Keeffe's paintings, or Holy cow, I'm all over the place. But anyway, so these breasts of milk and honey in a manger full of hay. Um, the babe awakes and the angels bow. Think about this. This infant awakes, and all of these angels, these powerful angels that have these huge wings of protection, and they're flying and they bow. I mean, there's just something, whether you believe that's literal or not, whether I believe it's literal or not, and I can't tell you because I wasn't there. So I choose not to say whether I think it was literal or not. But I can tell you when I just said that, I got these chills. I just love that image. The babe awakes and the angels bow. And then there's this phrase, the ox and the ass adore. And of course, in manger scenes, you always have, you've got the ox and you've got the donkey in there. And they too, even the animals, are, crying out their worship, to this infant. And I like this line right here, all of earth falls prostrate. So all of earth bows, like all of Mother Earth bows to this infant, falls prostrate. All the angels fall on their faces, fall prostrate. And then I added this line, life begins once more. I think that this is really an important line for me, for my understanding of the Christian story, because as I've looked at the different religions and I've tried to come up with common threads, I realize that if nothing else we see in nature, we see that life keeps beginning over and over and over again. There's this cycle of life, death, of rebirth. And to me, it is most powerful symbolically in the Christmas story. To say life is going to begin once more. I know I have a lot of Christian friends who would say, oh, no, the Christian faith is all about the cross and about Easter. I tend not to go down that route. I tend to say, no, I think the Christian faith really starts in the manger. That's when life began once more. And then, of course, Jesus would show us how to die as well. But life begins once more. That's as far as we're going to go today. I wanted to get to verse 4 and talk about archangels. And then we also have cherubim and seraphim. We have all of these angels. And all of these angels are above the manger. And it's like there's this infant, and everything just bows and stops and recognizes that life begins once more. It's like you might not believe in the literalness of that story, but you can certainly appreciate what an incredible image that is in this narrative. All right. Namaste, my friends. I'll see you next time.